It's all, if I can be blunt, it's all unicorns and rainbows.
I mean, we're not some magical place of unicorns and rainbows all the time. We got more than our fair share. But like the things that we've managed to do, we've had to work really, really hard at it.
Well, thought we'd show that little clip one more time. I'm not sure everybody had a chance to see that yesterday. That was a little bit of work we did here, and I think it's certainly worth looking at again. But I stumbled across something this morning, not from the usual networks, but it's interesting. And I think it reveals what the Liberal Party is actually up to and how liberals, the liberals, we used to call them. Remember in the Harper years, it's called them liberals. Because they think of nothing but themselves. It is amazing how crass and how incredibly self-centered and narcissistic they are. It's not just Justin Trudeau who's narcissistic. The Liberal Party, the bosses, the advisors, those people who make more money combined than the entire budget of the Canadian Armed Forces, those advisors, they're the ones who tell you what's up with the Liberal Party. We'll be back in a minute to discuss that very thing.
We need a political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, please like this broadcast. It's been a tough couple of days here, folks. Please, need your subscriptions. Share this with your friends and family. Let's get off to a good start here in 2025 as we're well into the first week. And I hope you've had a good week and chance to rest. I've had a couple of days, actually. And as I often say, I've been working myself a little too hard for the past 6 months with 15-hour days. And I finally got a few days rest here, and it's been good. I don't never forget the broadcast, but it's been good just to wind down and recharge. I hate those phrases that really have no meaning after, they're truisms. But after a while, we all need that. Now, I'm going to show you a couple clips here. And I'm going to start with Nick Nanos, though. But here we are. It's Wednesday now, the big day. Well, how many times have we heard this before, people? Caucus meeting on Wednesday. Big drama. Now, if you think for a second Justin Trudeau is going to emerge from here and saying, I'm out, well, you're going to have to convince me on that one. Because this is I have never seen, I can't remember a single picture of Trudeau with his tie not askew. It's amazing. It's like he never gets it right. It's almost a Freudian slip, isn't it? Like his mind is not in line. His mind is askew. His personality, his character is askew, and his tie reflects that. I really think that's fascinating. The way Justin Trudeau. So the way. And this is a guy, who's got all the money in the world for a wardrobe and for somebody to advise him how he should look when he leaves the house. But he does this consistently. I find it interesting. Now, let's listen to Nick Nanos because once again, Nick Nanos is not really a friend of conservatives, a friend of the Conservative Party of Canada, or for that matter, the people of Canada. He doesn't even include them, the BBC, on a lot of his polls. But Nick Nanos is always been, I would say, a little bit friendlier towards Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. And preceding Trudeau, he was always a little more friendly towards the Liberal opposition in the Harper years than he was towards Stephen Harper. Pollsters shouldn't really be. They should strive to ask completely objective, transparent questions that do not beg a certain answer. That's the mark of a bad pollster. But overall, Nick is not too bad. But listen to how Nick Nanos talks here in this interview, this CTV interview, about how bad things are for the Liberal Party. Then we'll get to what the truly interesting thing is today. A Liberal advisor talking about their secret plan.
And joining us now, Nick Nanos, the chief data scientist and founder of Nanos Research. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Fine, Roger. How you doing?
I can't complain except for the cold and the snow and all that stuff, but we're not going to do that, are we? We're going to talk Liberal Party and the ballot support for them.
Yep.
Or do we want to?
It's it's just one of those things where it's pretty clear that the Liberals and Justin Trudeau are both on the ropes. The thing is that in the weekly tracking, we look at the national numbers all the time, but with the Conservatives at 47 and the Liberals at 21. What we have to remember, Roger, is that when we look across the country in all the different regions, the Conservatives have more than 50% support in every single part of the country except Quebec, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a massive advantage for the Conservatives. And even in the province of Quebec, they're basically tied for second with the Liberals behind them.
You see these numbers? This is Nanos. 26% lead, essentially here. 26% lead over the Liberals. What's interesting about this is the Liberals are ahead of the NDP in this, in the tracking here. The polling from Abacus, for instance, has the Liberals and the NDP tied for second or third place, however you want to look at it. Very interesting.
Bloc Québécois. So you look at this significant lead nationally. If we take Quebec out of the equation, the Conservative advantage is even more massive, and it speaks to the pressure that Justin Trudeau is under right now to resign, and also the worry that many Liberals have that they could just get crushed in the next federal election.
And are these, like Mendicino announcing he's not seeking re-election, all these former cabinet and cabinet ministers saying they're not going to run again, does that have an impact on those numbers as well?
Well, it has an accumulation effect, Roger. It's kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And why don't we just squeeze a little lemon on top of that every time, a former senior Liberal like Mendicino decides to not run in the next federal election. So right now, the narrative is nobody wants to run for this guy. Like, who's stepping forward to run as a new individual under Justin Trudeau? Roger, are we hearing crickets? I think they're crickets playing right now. And the thing is that the narrative is that the Liberals significantly trail the Conservatives. Justin Trudeau has no political coattails, not even a political coat. People are leaving and not running and not reoffering to run under the Liberal banner. And right now, it's almost like a countdown to when he might step down.
And the tracking shows that there's just that continued decline. Even with all the goodies that the Liberals have tried to present, it's not moving the meter, is it?
Yeah, I think we're at the point now, Roger, where the only thing left for the Liberals to try to get back in the game, not saying they'd even be competitive, is to change the leader. Because they've tried everything else from a policy perspective, messaging. They've tried attacking Pierre Poilievre, attack ads, all that kind of stuff. None of it's stuck and none of it's worked. And the only thing left is to change the leader.
It'll be interesting to see, because I know apparently Mark Carney has been kind of sending out some feelers again that he may be interested in running. But boy, oh boy, they got a big plate there that they've got to deal with. And the NDP's not benefiting.
I mean, Mark Carney, yeah, he wrote a column, and he's interested in saving Canada, not running for the Liberals, but saving Canada. That, of course, is typical hubris from a globalist like Mark Carney. Mark Carney is as bad as Justin Trudeau can be. And this is the thing, and we'll get to this in the next section, the next segment. There are no alternatives to Justin Trudeau that are any better. There are they are all as bad. And perhaps, is it possible to be worse? Could be. Could be.
From this that much, are they?
Yeah, what we've seen is negative pressure on support for the New Democrats. We're in the teens, and for them at around 17%, that's not good. What they want, at least, is to be closer. And even when it comes to who Canadians would prefer as prime minister, Pierre Poilievre having a pretty significant advantage. I think about 40% of Canadians would give him a tip of the hat as the person they would prefer as prime minister. He's up 5 points in the last 4 weeks. Justin Trudeau's 23 points back at 17, and Jagmeet.
So what does that mean? Add that up. That's 70. That's less than 70%. What, the other 30% want who? Elizabeth May? No. What is this? 30% of Canadians don't know who they want to be as prime minister? That is pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic. I can't believe Poilievre's not scoring higher than 40. Should be at least 50.
At 14. So, what's transpired over the last 3 to 4 weeks, why don't we call it before Freeland and after Freeland? The after Freeland period has been bad for Justin Trudeau. It's been bad for the Liberals and the Conservatives right now. If they had wind in the sails before, it's like turbo wind now with a massive advantage, especially when you look at all the places across the country outside of the province of Quebec.
And we're almost out of time, but the economy and jobs, again, those are the big concerns, aren't they?
Yeah, and it speaks to Pierre Poilievre needing to focus on economy and the jobs as a top national issue of concern.
Does anybody see climate change here as one of the issues? Well, I'm shocked. I thought climate change was the most important issue. I thought it was a existential threat. There's nothing that comes up in the House of Commons during question period every day that doesn't get a response about climate change from the Trudeau Liberals. Yet it doesn't even register on here. It's probably about 1% in terms of importance. I know if I asked any of you, do you think climate change is important? I'd get zero, except for the trolls who would say, oh, yeah, it's an existential threat. No, none of us gives a damn about climate change. And yet we put up with this for 9 bloody years of a delusional prime minister leading a delusional government, thinking all Canadians are just as delusional and are concerned about climate change more than they are about putting food on the table. It's outrageous.
That's at the top. Inflation is at the top also. So, look at those two things. 3 out of every 10 Canadians want to hear about jobs in the economy and how to fight inflation. So for the Liberals, I don't even think if they talked about those issues, it would really help at this particular point in time. They really have to look at a leadership reset. If they don't look at a leadership reset, Roger, we may be looking at, it could be like 1984, and I'm not talking about George Orwell's book, but 1984, where they were down to 40 seats and defeated by a big Brian Mulroney progressive conservative blue wave.
Okay. Nick, thank you as always for your insights, sir. Appreciate it.
Take it easy.
You might recall in 1993, after Brian Mulroney resigned and Kim Campbell got the leadership of the Progressive Conservative Party, the PCs went down to 2 seats in the House of Commons. I was looking this up the other day because for some reason I was confusing 93 and 97 in my mind. 93 was when the Bloc Québécois formed the official opposition to everyone's distaste. Reform Party came in a big way, almost the same number of seats as the Bloc. Progressive Conservative Party was annihilated in that election, down to 2 seats. And of course, within a decade, it was gone as a party. Now, what's going to happen to the Liberals in the next time? This is going to happen. But listen to a Liberal. I'm going to play probably more of this interview than I should, but it's fascinating because it reveals the mindset of the Liberal Party. Now, who do you think really, really leads the Liberal Party? Who do you think really are the party bosses? Are the strategists. They're the lobbyists and the strategists and the people behind the scenes. Now, this is absolutely fascinating. I'll be commenting at a few times, but Just listen to the hubris, the arrogance, and the incredible presumption of this individual. And not to mention the ignorance at times of statements he makes.
Welcome back. As the new year gets going, all eyes are on this man, the Prime Minister of the country, who has recently returned, we understand, from a ski vacation in British Columbia and is facing now overwhelming pressure from within his own caucus to step aside. All of this happens as the most recent polling shows the Conservatives continuing to hold a large double-digit percentage advantage over the Liberals. My next guest says that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has three options in front of him. Andrew Perez is a Liberal strategist and a principal at Perez Strategies. Andrew, thanks to step aside. He surely cannot continue.
Andrew Perez, never heard of the guy before. But I agree with him on one thing, and I said this yesterday in the broadcast and in my Substack column. Yeah, he's got, and in the poll, if you took it yesterday, Justin Trudeau has three options. He's going to go through these, but just listen to the spin this guy puts on these options and about how it's all about not Canada. It's about the survival of the Liberal Party.
At this point.
Yes, Paul. I mean, you would think so. In the days following Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's bombshell resignation, things have got worse for the Prime Minister. He is quickly losing grip on the leadership of the Liberal Party and his government. We've seen now that the Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic caucuses have all expressed non-confidence in his leadership, and those MPs account for the vast majority of the 153-member Liberal caucus. And so what we're seeing is a political crisis for Mr. Trudeau at the worst possible time as we look ahead to January 20th, President Trump coming into the White House for a second time, who has threatened, an extremely punitive 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. And the problem for Mr. Trudeau is not only does he lack the political confidence of his own MPs, he now lacks the political capital to really go toe-to-toe and negotiate with the Trump administration. And that's why this has become a full-blown crisis, not just for the government and the Liberal Party, but for the country. Canada arguably faces the biggest threat to its sovereignty and its economic prosperity since the Second World War. And
all right, so bit of hyperbole there to say that this is a threat on the same scale as the Second World War. But this guy, Mr. Perez, acknowledges that this is a crisis for Canada. Watch how quickly he pivots to this being a crisis for the Liberal Party, and it's all about solving the problem for the Liberal Party.
So what we really need, we need a new prime minister, a new Liberal prime minister.
Wait, what? We need a new prime minister, but it's got to be a Liberal prime minister. What kind of a jackass would make that assessment? Clearly, the Liberal Party has failed for the last 9.5 years. Clearly, a new leader isn't going to make any difference. It could make things even worse. But this guy is so sold out to the Liberal Party that no, it's got to be a Liberal prime minister. And here's what we can do to make that happen.
We can get into the different options as to how that can come about.
Let's do that because you've essentially told us things that we already know at this point. So what are the options,
exactly.
The realistic options facing Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party right now?
Yes, so I think the most realistic option is for Mr. Trudeau to announce his resignation and prorogue. Proroguing Parliament means essentially setting the pause button on Parliament. All the legislation before Parliament will die.
Wrong, Perez. Read the parliamentary manual. It doesn't all die. The private members don't die. Obviously, you didn't do your research, did you? But the point is, how dare he say we can wait? Go ahead, this is what this guy wants. He wants Trudeau to prorogue so he can take 2 or 3 months, maybe stay on, but we can almost have a Liberal leadership race in the meantime. So while Canada suffers through 25% tariffs, the Liberals can grandstand for 3 months because Andrew Perez thinks it's a good idea, and Andrew Perez is speaking for the Liberal Party here.
And that prorogation will allow for the party for the Liberal Party to execute a leadership race that would have to be held in short order in no more than 2 or 3 months.
Short order is 2 or 3 months? Listen to the presumption here. Like the country's got 2 or 3 months for the Liberals to have a leadership race to repeat their talking points ad nauseum, but that's okay because this is not about Canada. It's about the Liberal Party. This is how incredibly self-centered these Liberals are.
Eventually, a new leader would be selected. That leader would be sworn in as prime minister. That prime minister could then announce a new cabinet, bring in a throne speech, which would lay out a new legislative agenda for the government. And of course, the timelines are extremely tight with Trump coming into power on the 20th. If Mr. Trudeau does not prorogue, the House of Commons is coming back on January 27th. I would expect the opposition parties to vote non-confidence in the government within weeks.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the
So he wants Trudeau prorogue to avoid a non-confidence motion, which Trudeau deserves to lose. This is what is being. What do you think Trudeau is listening to right now behind the scenes? What do you think? Who do you think he's listening to? The consultants like this guy, the advisors, and you think Trudeau is going to say, "Okay, we'll prorogue so we can have a Liberal leadership"? No, we're going to prorogue so I can survive, and that's the advice he's going to be listening to.
We've seen now that the Ontario would have to be held in short order in no more than 2 or 3 months. Eventually, a new leader would be selected.
New leader is named, a new cabinet is formed, and a throne speech delivered. Is there not pressure on that new prime minister who has not been elected by the Canadian public to call an election fairly soon, as did Kim Campbell many decades ago?
Yes, there would be immense pressure and the clock would be ticking. I suspect once the new prime minister introduced a throne speech and brought back Parliament, that the new government under the new prime minister would likely be defeated within days, if not weeks.
Okay, so listen to this timeline, how absurd this is. The House is already coming back 1 week after Donald Trump becomes president. He's talking about proroguing, having a 3-month leadership race, then an election. That would take us into the summer. Does this guy have any sense of time? Does he think for a second, hey, maybe we don't have 5 months? But if we have 5 months to save the Liberal Party, that's okay, because this isn't about saving Canada. This isn't about doing anything for the country. It's about doing everything for the Liberal Party.
There's always the possibility that one of the opposition leaders, most likely the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh or possibly the Bloc, could work with the new government and the new prime minister and support that government on an interim basis for a few weeks or a few months. So nothing is ironclad in this scenario, Paul. But yes, even with a new prime minister, there would likely be an election. But prorogation would buy this government time, probably 2 to 3 months. And
we have 2 to 3 months. Buying the government, meaning buying the Liberal Party time. That's what you mean to say. So this is the plan they're working on. And Trudeau, of course, will amend the plan accordingly to whatever works out best for him. Because, yeah, it's the Liberal Party, but it's Trudeau's party above all as far as Justin Trudeau is concerned. I find this conversation absolutely fascinating because this guy is laying it out in terms of how the Liberals plan to steal democracy. What else could happen? Think about this for a second. What else could happen while the Liberals are proroguing, while the Liberals are having a Liberal leadership race, while they slowly come back to having the House of Commons sitting again? Well, we could have a national emergency, which would rule out an election. And that new Liberal leader could rule by decree. And who do you think that new Liberal leader could be? Mark Carney? Chrystia Freeland? What kind of options? Why does this guy think changing the leader of the Liberal Party is going to make them any more viable, any more desirable to Canadians? It will not, because the polling is already suggesting that the alternatives to Justin Trudeau are even more unpopular than Justin Trudeau is. So there's no thought behind this except buy time for the Liberal Party.
With prorogation, we would likely be looking at a spring election. Without prorogation, the country could likely be plunged into a general election as soon as February.
And that's where we need to be. Plunged into a general election as soon as February. Probably March, actually. That's where we need to be. Justin Trudeau needs to face the voters. The Liberal Party needs to be defeated. We need to move on quickly. Not to give people like you an opportunity to keep flapping their gums about how great the Liberal Party is and how we need a Liberal Prime Minister. Might not be Justin Trudeau, but we still need a Liberal Prime Minister. We don't have the luxury of listening to this kind of strategy. And no, if they prorogue, it's not going to be 2 or 3 months. It's going to be up to 6 months. Do the arithmetic, Andrew. You're not doing your arithmetic because you're not even listening to what you're saying.
And, so that brings us to the issue of a non-confidence vote. What is your sense of the lie of the land there, given the shifted position of the NDP, which voted to support the government repeatedly over the past year or so, now saying that it will vote no confidence? When do you think, if no confidence is where we're headed, a no confidence vote, how soon do you think that may happen?
If Mr. Trudeau does not prorogue Parliament before January 27th, when it's set to come back, I would expect the opposition parties to vote non-confidence within days. There are opposition days that are slated for the opposition parties in Parliament, and they can use those days to put forward a non-confidence vote. And so that could happen, as I say, within days of Parliament coming back on January 27th. But I do think that prorogation is increasingly looking likely.
Okay. So what we need to do then is ensure that Justin Trudeau doesn't prorogue until the House resumes on January 27th. Because otherwise we're looking at being in a holding pattern for the benefit of people like this, Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, and who knows, even Justin Trudeau. Prorogation would be a crime at this point. The people have had enough. The people are saying, get rid of this government. I'm telling you, folks, if Trudeau prorogues, if that's a serious option right now, that is going to put the country in a very dangerous position. And I think the pushback from voters could result in some highly undesirable actions, could result in violence. And that is a concern. When a government refuses to go, when a government refuses to bend to the will of the people, when a government is more about the party than it is about the federal government, as the Liberals are, and as Justin Trudeau is, that puts everybody in a very dangerous position.
I think Mr. Singh and Mr. Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc, have been absolutely clear that they no longer have confidence in a government led by Mr. Trudeau. Now, would that change under a government led by a different Liberal leader and Prime Minister? I don't know. I think that is what remains to be seen. And so there is a scenario where a new Prime Minister following prorogation could buy some time, could introduce a budget. Now, that budget could be defeated and the country would be plunged into an election.
Now he's talking about a budget. So we've got prorogation. a leadership race, an election, a throne speech. And what? A budget? So we could be looking till October until we have an election now. Is this guy even thinking? And in the meantime, Donald Trump has no confidence at all, knowing that this government is a puppet government. That's all it's going to be, is a puppet government. It will have no viability, no legitimacy, because Trump knows it's going to be thrown out as soon as there is an election. And it's just clawing its way through the weeks and the days, clinging desperately to power. And you think Donald Trump isn't going to know that this is a vulnerable, illegitimate government? Of course he will.
But the government would only need one opposition party to support that budget in order for the government to stay afloat.
Okay, and we're basically out of time. So very quickly, you see a third option as well, and it has been talked about somewhat in the news media, and that's an immediate Liberal leadership race, a race that would start almost ASAP. How likely is that?
That's another possibility. And I think the third option is really the appointment of an interim prime minister, which has never been done in Canada. We've never had an interim prime minister. And so that would require the Liberal caucus in collaboration with the national executive, the national board of the party, to come to a consensus on who should lead the party and the government on an interim basis. That could be done during a Liberal leadership race, or if...
Once again, Andrew Perez doesn't seem to be aware of how his own party works. There is no mechanism to get rid of Justin Trudeau. Is he suggesting he's going to resign and an interim prime minister will be nominated, will be appointed? I don't think he understands really what he's saying here, except this is what the Liberals are up to. It's about buying time. It's about preserving the Liberal brand as long as possible, so something miraculous can happen.
There wasn't a time for a leadership race, given the political and economic crisis we find ourselves in. That interim prime minister could actually lead the Liberal Party into a general.
Yeah. So there you go. That's what the Liberals are up to. This is what their backroom boys are planning. This is what their strategists think will work. Buying time. Maybe for Trudeau, maybe for the party, but never for the country. They're not in this to help Canada. They never have been. And right now, this is the Liberal Party at its absolute worst. I've never seen it. So completely amoral and so completely without any compass that's pointing towards the national good. Thank you for watching today, folks. Resolve to resist every day of your life. And I'll be back tomorrow with more of the news you need to know.